All right, we're recording.
All right, great. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Clinic using AI in business. This training is co-hosted by the South Dakota Center for Enterprise Opportunity West and East, and also by Grow South Dakota. I'm Elizabeth Freer. I'm the director of the Center for Enterprise Opportunity West. I'm joined by my colleague, Sadie Sweer, director of SDCEO East. We also have Ashley Wingert and Blake Dunphy with us from the West team today, as well as Olivia DeBoer with Grow South Dakota is here with us. So we are so glad that all of you are here and have joined us for this. This webinar introduces how businesses can use AI tools to improve productivity while protecting sensitive data and filtering out the noise. Participants will learn practical, safe ways to use AI for everyday business tasks while understanding common risks such as data exposure, hallucinations, and AI-enabled scams. A quick note on housekeeping before we begin. Please keep your microphone muted. Today's session is being recorded and we'll share the recording with everyone who has attended. Use the chat widget to ask your questions and we'll try to flag those for Tyler if they seem relevant to where we are, or we'll save them to the end. And Sadie and I will both monitor those questions. And lastly, if your Zoom name doesn't match your registration, for example, it says iPhone 7, please update the name on Zoom or send Ashley Wingert a message to let her know so we can confirm your registration. As our resource partner, Grow South Dakota has been empowering individuals and families for over 50 years by strengthening communities and through housing support, business loans, and coaching, digital literacy, financial education, home buyer services, furnace repair, and weatherization programs. They are a great partner of ours, and we're excited to have them help co-host this webinar. For SDCEO, as I mentioned, jointly hosted by SDCEO East, SDCEO West. Together, our 5 staff members make up the South Dakota Women's Business Center Network, and we serve the entire state. We offer training, networking, SBA and industry resource connections, free confidential one-to-one business advising. Anyone is welcome to reach out to either center. Our mission is simple. We empower women to propel economic development across South Dakota. And yes, while our mission says that we focus on women because of our Women's Business Center grant, we work with men too. Clearly, as Tyler is presenting today, and we have lots of men who attend our training and use the services of our program. SDCEO is hosted by Black Hills State University, and both centers are partially grant funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration, along with generous support from our event sponsors and 33 annual investors. Support from these annual investors, individual donors, and event sponsors helps us make a real difference for the businesses and individuals that we serve across the state. So far in this grant year, which started October 1st, we have helped launch 7 businesses statewide and assisted 7 transactions, securing over $108,000 in capital investments to date. Our one-to-one business advising is always free. You can find resources and support when you need it for your business. Our training programs are also free or low cost, such as this program. So if you find value in our programs, we invite you to join us as either a sustaining monthly donor or make a one-time donation to help keep our programs available to everyone. And your help helps us expand our impact. We collect data from the businesses we support, which help tell the economic impact story of our network and the work that we're doing across the state of South Dakota. We never share your individual information, but you can help us by sharing the story of your business and those business milestones, such as an investment in private capital or loans, changes in profit or employees, or maybe even starting a new business through the post-event survey or reaching out to any one of us on our team. Before we dive in, there are a couple of upcoming events. I'm going to flash through these really quickly, but Blake is going to drop a link in the chat where you can access information about all of our events. So there's an upcoming Coffee and Conversation free event next week, February 4th in Chamberlain, Oklahoma. So connect with our mid-state network. Monthly Wisdom, Innovation, and Networking Luncheon with Heidi Meckham in Rapid City on February 10th. Registration deadline later this week. Great opportunity to connect in person in Rapid City. We have 3 more sessions of our 4-part HR training for small businesses that are still happening. The next one is next week, February 12th. You can attend in person or online, but online super easy. And actually, we're headed that direction. So anywhere in the state, you can come and learn about legal compliance and HR, staying out of hot water. March 5th, Kelly Kirk is going to talk for our Women in History event in Spearfish. And then we're back in Chamberlain on March 10th. Tracy Hargens is going to talk about the power of numbers and simplifying bookkeeping. And very exciting, we're in Aberdeen for our 7th annual Women's Business Conference on March 12th. Join us for keynote speakers, workshop panel, networking, so many good things. Tickets, early bird tickets are available through February 20th. And then Dr. Tyler Flaggen's next cybersecurity clinic will be on April 2nd. We are still working on the topic, and so we invite you to fill out a topic survey form to help us determine which topic we'll discuss. By filling out this survey within the next week or so, we want to address topics that are of interest to you. So you can sign up now with the QR code and be surprised about the topic. You can also fill out the survey and help us decide that. On April 28th, we'll have another webinar, Digital Marketing Demystified, hosted by Lauren Ebert with Rochambeau Creative. Learn about social media marketing and SEO. And finally, Women in Leadership Applications, which is a 4-day series taking place in Spearfish. Amazing opportunity that we run each summer. Check out our website for details. So with that, we're going to move on to our program, but I'd like to introduce Sadie Sweer, Director of SDCEO East, to introduce today's training and our presenter and share a couple of upcoming events hosted by East. Sadie?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. One event coming up for the East Side is hosted in Lenox, South Dakota on March 18th. The Empowerment Seminar includes a panel luncheon as well as breakout discussions focused on small business ownership. You can register for this program online or get a vendor booth, as well as our next event coming up in April in Huron, South Dakota. This will be a bilingual small business basics training. So if you are Spanish speaking, English speaking, we will have breakout sessions with a focus on startup businesses as well as scaling small businesses in Huron on April 23rd in the evening. So those are a few in-person events for SDCO East. So today, our speaker, we're excited to have Dr. Tyler Flaggen back with us, and he is the assistant professor at Dakota State University, Beacon's College of Computer and Cyber Sciences, and he will guide us on how to use AI to protect your business without getting overwhelmed by technology. He has an extensive track record of identifying and neutralizing complex threats across both academic and high-stakes defensive environments. Having served as a red team operator for the Naval Information Warfare Center Atlantic, Tyler understands the unique challenges of defending data against sophisticated AI-driven attacks. And now, as the director of the Deep Red Lab at DSU, Tyler ensures business leaders making sure that they receive practical strategies that help organizations stay one step ahead. He is passionate about empowering business owners and teams to navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of modern cyber threats in an AI-powered world. And let me tell you, this is our 4th event of this cyber series, and every one we've done, he has been great. And at least for me personally, I've always had great takeaways. So please help me welcome Dr. Tyler Flaggen. Take it away.
Thank you. So getting started today, I'm talking a little bit about AI for business. I'm going to go through and talk about a lot of the ways in which I use it, on a day-to-day basis. Simple things that can help out, help with routine tasks, repetitive tasks, so that we can kind of spend more time working on the things that we want to work on, or more time on things with our personal life. So, jumping in, this is brought to you in part by the Consortium of Cybersecurity Clinics as part of the Google, or DSU's Google grant with the Tides Foundation. As a part of this, I do presentations. We also have other groups on campus doing other types of support, whether that's doing penetration testing or vulnerability assessments, helping with some security things across the state. There's a variety of services we have involved with this. And as Sadie mentioned, my name's Tyler Vloggin. I'm a professor at DSU, primarily teach in the offensive security world. That's where a lot of my background lies. Um, do a few other things outside of teaching, obviously, when it comes to doing presentations or research, those sorts of things. But a little bit about me. Today, we'll jump in, talk a little bit about AI, the things that are around us, the tools that are around us, right? I'm not going to jump into, the math behind it or necessarily the deep dive of how the tools work, but just to give you a little bit of background so we know a little bit about what we're dealing with. Talk about like our uses in business, so things that can help with again our administrative work, routine tasks or repetitive tasks, and things today. I'm talking about the ways that I use it, things that don't require new software or licensing. I know there's a lot of AI tools or tools that include AI that are out there that cost money, and we're not talking about that today. I'm talking about things that we can use, online for free. If we talk about ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or Gemini, things that are tools that we can jump into today just by opening up a web browser. Trying to take back a little bit of time. And also one of the things to talk about is we're not doing anything like fancy or futuristic here. We're trying to show very useful things that can help us. We're also not trying to throw, or I'm not going to try and show you, the cheesy things we see in all the social media of like the posts that you see or the videos or the silly pictures, things like that. Um, Kind of just generic uses of mostly the chat functionality with these different tools and a few others. So again, ideally we try to save time, reduce costs, reply faster, sell more, depends on what your business is. And then at the end, a little bit again on safety and thinking about how these actually work and how their outputs could maybe cause problems or how we need to approach using them rather than give them full control over everything. So looking at tools, right? You've probably heard about a handful of these, maybe all of them, maybe not all of them, but there are a ton of different tools coming out. Lots of different companies jumping in the space and creating tools that are available to us. I think the big ones that everyone has heard about, OpenAI's ChatGPT is a big one, and then we start to hear from big companies like Microsoft with Copilot. Copilot is being integrated into all of our office tools. So, if you open up PowerPoint or Word or Excel on a day-to-day basis like I do, you're constantly being bombarded with like, hey, here's Copilot, here's stuff to do with it. Gemini, another one from Google, large companies jumping in and kind of bringing back. Most of what I'm going to talk about today is I use ChatGPT a lot. I do use a little bit of Gemini when I want to see a little bit different results. I'll talk about that in one of the upcoming slides. And then obviously within Office tools, you can use Copilot a little bit easier than maybe leaving your tool, going to a website, and then coming back to your tool. Um, but again, there are a ton of tools out there. I'm sure you've heard of many of them. So a little bit of background on AI, just so we have a little bit of understanding. Um, the AI that we're using today is backed by something called large language models, right? It's not like scientific or like sci-fi types of things or like really fancy intelligence. These large language models are just these machine learning models that are trained on giant sets of data that most of them have just pulled from the internet, right? They've pulled down trillions and trillions of different things from the internet and puts together and trained them based on what it sees. So when you're watching one of the tools reply to you and you see like the word by word pop up, oftentimes what the model is doing is basically trying to figure out what the next word is, right? It's not this really complex reasoning. We're not to that point yet where we have what we jump down to the bottom here of like artificial general intelligence or AGI. Right? We're not dealing with that yet. That's kind of one of the goals of these companies is who can get to AGI first, because that's a major milestone. Um, we don't have that, so it doesn't have like the full level reasoning that we do. It doesn't understand the context that we do, and there are some of those limitations. So what we have today is still very powerful and useful, but it's still specialized in a way, right? It's not a replacement for what we as humans can judge or deal with when it comes to context or emotional intelligence or those sorts of things. Now, jumping into one of my first uses I use it all the time for is just general research, right? When I'm digging into a new topic, I use this as like a research assistant, right? If I'm trying to learn something new or I have like this idea of what I think something is, I start dumping information into, let's say, ChatGPT. It's a good one to start with. Again, everyone can jump there for free, and use some of their models, but basically start asking it questions about a given topic. And it starts replying with data and then allows you to kind of start to ask further questions. And when you're using it, there's these things called tokens that you've maybe heard of in some of the news articles. But when you send a message back to the agent, understand that all of the previous information is being sent every time you send a new information. So when it's replying, it's taking all of that information again, stuffing that in, and then reading back or creating a new response based on everything that's there before. So they're aware of the context of the chat because it's getting resent every single time, right? So that search engine is like keeping track of what you're saying and also pulling up new results. And the new models, in 2026 here, are getting a lot better. Especially like I like Gemini for this, because it's Google's. Is it goes and it starts to pull sources from online instead of just making stuff up, right? Versus if we look at like ChatGPT 3 or ChatGPT 2, some of the older models, they wouldn't go and pull sources. So we're kind of just, we're learning based on whatever they have, right? They're not going and pulling new things. In our models that we have today, they're actually going out and pulling down new information, and new sources, and we'll give that to you, which helps when something we look at later is there are problems with hallucinations, right? Which is just where the model will give you an incorrect answer, right? The sources allow us to fact check those things, go and double check to make sure that what it's giving us is correct. So basically helps us create insights, pull down new data from very large data sets, again, basically from the whole internet now, be able to compare and contrast different things. So if I jump in with a topic like, interesting one I've done lately is looking at retirement numbers, like of what do I currently have in my retirement accounts and what does it think I'm going to need in, uh, you know 40 years, and tell it to break those numbers down for me and tell me about all the different things that other people look at, when they're looking at that answer. So it helps us reduce time looking for answers, gives us sources, all sorts of things. Just like if we had a research assistant, if we could just delegate some tasks over to them, that's kind of what it allows us to do in the research side. Now, when we look at like projects or products or creating workflows, it allows us to just brainstorm. I use this a lot, and again, maybe a little bit specific to me, is when I'm developing new lab environments or new labs for our students. I have this idea, this overarching idea of like, here's the area that I want this lab. What would be, ask it something like, what would be an impactful lab environment, or what would the outcomes be? Of this lab environment, and then we can start to break down different pieces of it into smaller problems to get a little bit better. Now, a really really common thing, and if you haven't gotten a chance to really play with one of these, I recommend that you just sit down and play with ChatGPT and put stuff in. As you're going through, remembering that it takes all of the previous messages as its context, the tokens, and it puts it in each time. Understand that if it's not giving you an answer that you like, or it's too vague, or it's not quite down the right path, understand that the next thing that you give it can be refinement, right? Refining, or you call it guardrails, or specifics. You add those things in, and all of a sudden you can start to narrow down your project that you're working on, and start to get a little bit more, aligned with what you're thinking, down to the point where it has a really good idea, and then you can ask for all the other things that go along with it, right? So if you say like, my problem of here, I need a lab on offensive security, that's a really wide topic, in our area. What might be some example labs for that? And I can say, okay, pick number two, or take number two, the one that you gave me, and give me some learning outcomes for that, or where would it fit within these other types of labs? Brainstorming again, if you're working on a new product or projects, or something along those lines, you could do, look at the opportunities, risks, other approaches. If you think of just like a general SWOT analysis, can help you do those. It might find some things or come up with some things that maybe you miss when you go through it, right? Go through your topic. And then obviously the big one of like overcoming writer's block, or maybe we're not writing, maybe we're doing something else. We're just trying to come up with an idea and we're stuck, right? You're stuck thinking about or working on the same thing over and over again. You can't kind of make that next step. These models can help you do that just by giving it the context and saying like, what would be the next step, or what are some competing approaches, or again, maybe just a SWOT analysis of what you're trying to do that. Again, and it's still based on what's out there. It's not general intelligence. It's not being completely creative, but it's giving you ideas based on what it's seen before and as part of its training. Drafting text from a wide variety. One note I will say, if you've caught the news articles, there's a lot of news articles coming out talking about how folks that tend to use AI for creative activities after months of using AI become less creative. Is a very short way of saying it, but some interesting research that's coming out in that area. But again, overcoming that writer's block, starting with initial ideas, saying again, going back to my specifics of when I'm working on a new thing for the class, I say within this class, what is a good idea for a lab that would have these types of outcomes, or that would have these types of objectives, right? And then once we have those initial ideas, we can start to provide structure on that and say, hey, give me the outline, give me the different pieces. And the big part of this is always going back and refining. So if you ask it a really simple, really vague question, it'll start with something, but as you start to refine that question down through multiple chats, that can really help get what you want out of these tools. And some people talk about prompting, right? So they'll talk about you'll see these things on social media. People talk about how to be better at prompting the agents, or you see even courses on how to prompt agents. And all they're trying to say is, here's how you give it more information to give you what you want better, right? So the more you give it specifics, the more you outline the context, the better result that you're going to get. Again, because the tools don't understand our context right away, and they won't ever understand the full context. But we can always give it more and more things and try to develop that a little bit better. So we can make our writing process a little bit quicker depending on what we're trying to write. So, a really good example, if we're for a small business, right? You don't maybe you're starting to look at it, hiring employees, and um, everyone that's there has been with you from the start, so you don't really have training, right? You've all kind of come up together, you've built this thing together, but you're starting to look at, well, if we hired someone, what do we need to train them on? What do we need to develop, and start to say, well, here's our business. ChatGPT, hey, what does a training outline look for a position, you know, what a position XYZ in our company XYZ with the goals of doing this, this, and this, right? And you can say, if you throw in, copy paste in the entire job posting and say, what training things should we give this, right? It will very quickly come out with a training outline. Again, that's not very refined yet, but as a very general outline that you can further refine on your own, or have it refine more um, based on your thing. And in my example, again, going back to like labs and assignments for students, one of the things that I like to do when it comes to drafting these is I'll say, give me 20 versions of questions that go along within this topic, within this lab, within offensive security, and then I'll kind of read through them, get the overall gist of them, and kind of pick the two or three or four or five that I'm going to use, and then modify them the way I want. Right? I don't just say, give me five and then copy paste those five. I say, give me 25 or give me 50. Give me, 50 bullets for this slide, and say, and then go through myself and say which ones are the best for what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to accomplish here. Summarizing data. This is a kind of an interesting one. I have an interesting use case going forward here. Right. So we can take any large amount of data and basically dump it into a tool and create summaries for it. Down at the bottom, and I'll jump into this in a second. There's a tool out there called Notebook LM. It's really interesting. Can do a lot of different things with variety of data, but we can quickly capture essential points, basically go through and like process information very quickly, identify things that you might need to do, so actions that you need to take. Again, we go back to like it can do a SWOT analysis. I can dump a bunch of basically data in and say what else is out there, come up with competing ideas, contrasting ideas, to learn more about a topic or to very quickly jump through some hoops there. And I know this is one people use a lot. We can dump not only just copy pasting data, but we have tools now that just accept different formats. And I want to pull up Notebook LM. So basically, what I did right before we started this is I took these slides. I took a PDF of the slides that I'm presenting right now, and basically loaded it into um, Notebook LM. So Notebook LM is a tool made by Google. I'm not paying for this. I just have a regular account. So I just Googled Notebook LM, jumped this in, um, and then uploaded my PDF of this, right? And then I clicked a few of these buttons. So the studio over here on the right allows you to just generate some common things from your data that you give it, and you can give it more than one thing over here. But for an example, I told to make me some flashcards, right? And we have these flashcards that are automatically made based on what we're doing. Maybe flashcards aren't the interesting part for you. Maybe you're interested in trying to figure out, what's actually being talked about. So you can have it develop a mind map. And I did this beforehand just because each one of these takes about a minute. Takes about a minute to read your document, and then a minute to if you go and click mind map. But we can jump in and say like, all right, if we go to our next thing that we're about to talk about, let's talk about like drafting and tone. We're talking about right now. We can see that structures and outline, tone adjustment, audience targeting is all very important, a part of that. Um, so this is a really interesting tool. Let me jump back to Studio here. We can do an audio overview, so you can get very quick audio breakdowns of things. We have data tables. If I click on that, it just generates a data table based on what I have. And again, if I were to throw a bunch of different things in here, it can pull from that. We can add different sources from the internet. And then I can also query based on what I've given it. So I could say, um, give me 5 summary bullets for this presentation. And again, takes just a minute or two to come up with some different answers. Pulling down is looking directly at the content that I gave it in PDF format, right? I don't have to go and like copy paste or anything. And then gives me some different bullet points, right? With sources pulling there, gives me some then ideas of where I could go to next. So we could talk about like one of the things we'll talk about in the future here in a couple minutes, agentic AI. Like how does that differ from what we're dealing with now? So it's going to drop a bunch of different things in there, and we can start to also add source or search the web for other sources and add to this. So a really interesting tool. I have another use case for it here that I've thought about and I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't use that I'll talk about here in a minute. But really easy way to like summarize a bunch of data. Again, we don't need to pay for it. Just jumping in and dropping our tools. So our next one, the one of the things you probably saw in there is managing tone, right? So writing is hard. Writing is difficult for everyone in some sort of way. And how a message is received or handling how a message is received is also difficult, right? So not only like our tone and how we write a message, but then making sure that it's received in the right way. I'm sure everyone here has been in a, either email on an email thread or within text messages or whatever, has sent a message and someone incorrectly interpreted what you were trying to say based on what you said because there's no tone in text, right? When we have email or just text messaging, there's no tone there. So we can have these tools help us adjust our writing style to match our intended tone, right? We can rewrite messages to make sure that they're, clear, respectful, and appropriate. If we're really angry at something or something's really frustrating, maybe you want to like dial that back a little bit and say, "Hey, I wrote this email. It's really, it's on the edge of being too much. Can you bring it back to be very, level-headed?" We can also adapt communication for different audiences, right? Whether it's for, if we want to write messages for customers or teammates, or maybe we're trying to write messages to executives um, or funding partners, there are different ways that you can modify the messages that you write based on what you're trying to write. Right. So we can basically go through and say, hey, what's wrong with this message? We can help it fix, spelling and grammar, which are just in our general tools. If we look at Outlook, right, that helps us a bunch already, but it can help us a little bit more with that to make sure that the message that we're trying to send is what's getting sent. Um, from a business perspective too, thinking about if we're messaging customers, if we want to have like a specific brand voice, or like a specific communication style that is consistent across our organization or consistent across multiple people. Again, the small business side, if we only have a handful of people, we have tools that can help us do that. We can generate prompts that say, here's what we want our communication style to be, and we can share that prompt with our teammates and say we can run messages through this if you're not sure, and see what else comes out of that and maybe modify our message based on that. Recording notes in a meeting. This is one I'm sure everyone's seen it. I know we have a couple, whether it's Otter AI, Read AI. I know there are a couple in the chat today. I wish this is something I would have done earlier. I've known about these tools for a while, but I had this idea as I was making this of in the past I've been on a board, and a part of that board, kept notes for our meetings and things like that. I wish I had used one of those tools to keep notes on all our meetings. So then the next step is I could take all of the monthly minutes and dump them back into Notebook LM that I just showed you, and then be able to query data based on what was in that notebook, right? Because within that notebook is all that consistent data that I can look up. So over the course of a year of board meetings, if I'd put each board meeting minutes into that notebook, I would then be able to query based on all that data with natural language, right? I don't have to write any technical jargon. I can just ask it human questions, and it can go through and pull that out. It's one thing I just thought about as I was basically combining these two slides, right? This one along with the one on Notebook LM. It would have been very helpful in certain cases of tracking data instead of having to go through manually and look through each meeting minutes and see like what if I'm going back and looking for information on specific decisions that were made or how they're made or when they were made. That'd be a good combination of these two things. But again, the things that you've all seen, Read AI, Otter AI, capture key points. You get these summaries from them. You can organize notes very easily based on them. You don't have to sit and type. It's one of the decisions that, or not decisions, the problems I always had if conversation is going very quickly back and forth. Sometimes it was difficult for me to keep up. Just making sure to keep all the notes of what was being said when we had really important conversations. Um, and then again, at the end, when you have those, it becomes very easily like I could dump those minutes back into Notebook LM and say, what are the really important next steps based on these minutes, or who has responsibilities based on these, and then have these recaps to be able to be sent out to everyone at the end, so that everyone has that available to them. Right, and I could share again, going back to the notebook side, that could be shared too as a notebook, so that everyone could access it and query it based on different information. So there's some really interesting kind of opportunities there. Now, with all that, there are limitations to AI, right? One of the main ones that I've mentioned a couple times is it can't fully understand the context of the problems that we give it or our critical reasoning that we have as people. So when we're using that, that's just something that we need to keep in the back of our head, um, that's not fully there, right? If we have some sort of decision that we need to make, it doesn't have the critical reasoning. It also doesn't have like emotional intelligence, and it may not always make, the models may not always make decisions, let's say, correctly based on ethical considerations either, right? Maybe that they are sure they may be making decisions based on strictly logical considerations instead of emotional or ethical. So it's always something to keep in the back of your mind and combat kind of the bias that these have. Again, our models have progressed when we look at Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok, whatever model we're using, they've progressed a lot. In from just a year ago, to kind of have some of that or do a little bit better job of that, let's say. But that's something to always consider. And there's still hallucinations, right? And again, hallucinations is just another way of saying that the AI is providing you misleading or incorrect output. So we always need to have, which is on our next slide here, a human in the loop to kind of verify, validate, make sure that we're looking at that and not just always blindly accepting it, but going ahead and kind of looking at it with the eye of a devil's advocate each time you get some sort of output from it. Right. In the end, remember, like going back to the very beginning, think about this like it's a research assistant, right? It's not a decision maker. It's just helping you do the things that you do every day. That's kind of where we're at with AI. Obviously, the field's moving very quick. We're going to see some changes in it, and it is getting much better at these types of or addressing the limitations that we're talking about. So, gets us into like there should always be some sort of human in the loop in maybe not each step, but most steps of what it's doing. Right. I don't recommend copying and pasting AI responses. I've gotten a few emails recently where I submitted a ticket for something and I got back what was very clearly just they copy pasted what I put in. They copied it into ChatGPT. They copied the output and they sent that back to me, which on my end was very, very frustrating because I didn't need a whole paragraph saying, basically just summarizing what I told them. Um, so I don't always recommend just copy pasting that. Right, take the bullets, write your own response is a great way. Limit that down to not do that sort of thing. We also need to think about privacy and security when it comes to what we're putting into it. Another slide on that later. And then I'm sure you've all heard of the term AI slop or the things it starts to output. So when we talk about AI slop, it might not necessarily be incorrect or misleading information, but just things that's, there's all sorts of extra stuff around what we actually want to say, and making sure that that doesn't always go out, right? If we are let's say we're working on a marketing campaign for your small business. We don't want to just copy paste stuff from ChatGPT and have like all this garbage out there that doesn't look good. Right, a kind of funny example in the Verona Cross in an airport once. There's the marketing on the walls. Me and some friends have noticed. There's some marketing, and of course, as part of the airport, they put airplanes in their marketing. Uh, but the plane that they put in had three engines on it, which for those people who fly a lot, you notice like the plane type, and we noticed that plane type doesn't ever have three engines on it. Um, right, is something that was very clearly generated with AI, and not, and again, it's just marketing. It's just a picture of a plane, but just walking by a few friends and I noticed like that's not correct. That's clearly generated by AI. It's kind of just slop outputted by from whatever tool that they use to generate that picture. Now, as we're going forward, and like I talked about, these models are improving, they're changing, our tools overall are changing, not just the models. One of the things that you're going to start hearing more about, if you haven't, is agentic AI. So agentic AI is basically moving beyond these simple chatbots, and coming up with these agents that can perform multiple actions on systems or on tools, and basically can do these multi-step tasks. Now, this is not like something brand new. There are agentic systems out there. It's just not something that's what I would say readily available for the general user. It's something that I assume will be. There are people that have built agentic tools that we could kind of go and let's say install on systems and do different things. But basically, think of it as the next step of it's not just providing responses. It's basically you give it something, it creates a response. It knows how to use tools around it, whether that be online tools or tools on your system to basically take the next step, and then maybe even look at the output from that and take that into a more complex decision-making tree, right? So there still needs to be human oversight. Again, there can be mistakes made, but this is something that's coming, right? And an example that we'd starting to see is like the chatbots. inside of websites that we run across would be a good example of, as they start to gain more and more authority to be able to take actions without the human. Uh, there's more and more things that will deal less and less with humans, right? I know Amazon has some of this built in. If you've ever tried to do or recently tried to do like a return to Amazon, sometimes it won't ever actually escalate to a real human. Which a funny story about that. I have a friend who ordered a water bottle and accidentally got sent a case of water bottles. And when he tried to return it, it never got escalated high enough for them to figure out. And the thing kept saying something along the lines of, yeah, you got your water bottle, and wouldn't understand that he instead got a case of water bottles. Right? So not perfect, but that's kind of like one of the directions we're seeing this agentic system go, where there's not really as much human oversight. A big one that is definitely being built into like customer relationship tools is just automated CRM. So when I say CRM, just talking about when you visit websites, and you have an account, they know to follow up with you and send you not only just the, hey, you left this in your cart emails, but the text messages and the things that are, what do you like, and kind of build into the advertising, taking again the advertising data that we've seen forever inside of websites, associating that with your customer and associate your customer account, your profile, um, things in your cart, all those sorts of things are kind of being combined together, and these automated approaches are not being done by humans anymore, right? They're trying to sell more and have less people in the loop. So that's one of the future things there. At the end of it all, again, remembering our safety, right? Not entering sensitive data. We've seen this, especially in the news lately, about entering sensitive data, whether that's customer or employee data, financial data, government data. Again, it's the big one recently in the news. Intellectual property. We don't always know or what the tools are being retrained on. So we talked about how the models are trained on a bunch of data. The tools that we're using like ChatGPT, Copilot, unless you have the enterprise versions of them, they are using the data that is being entered in them to be retrained based on the new stuff. So it's not stuck at a certain point in time based on what it was trained on. There's a constant retraining going on to try and make the models better. We don't want the models trained on very sensitive information to our business or even our personal lives. Validating responses, again, going to misleading, incorrect output. There's the hallucinations, those sorts of things. Paying attention to bias. All the models have some sort of bias to them. Which way that bias is, or what the bias actually is, whether it's like a left-right bias, or whether it's bias to certain types of responses. We don't always know what those prompts are behind the scenes that create the bias. So just kind of paying attention to what output we're getting, and always playing devil's advocate a little bit. If you're looking at implementing or just seeing what a simple AI policy is, or a use policy, acceptable use policy, SD is a good one. That's it's really short. I recommend everyone go and just take a look at it. It has some examples in it. Um, there's not a ton to it, which I think would again be great for if you're a small business and you're starting to bring on more and more employees, you say, you know what, like we know AI is here, we know it can be really useful, but we want to kind of limit the ways we use it so we don't run into issues where we give it sensitive data, right? We don't just dump our entire customer database in there and say, here, go for it. So looking at like how some policy is written when it comes to using AI. Now, before I leave you with a quick summary here, an activity for you to, if you've not played around with ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, jump into one of those after we're done here. Any of the chat-based AIs, right? Again, free, no licensing, no software, whatever. Um, Give it some information about, you can start with the overall, like your job or your tasking or your company, like things that you do throughout the day, right? Just kind of define some of that and ask it to provide ways that the ChatGPT or AI could help you, that could solve one of your workflows or finish one of your workflows for you. Again, we're trying to basically steal time back for work that we want to work on, or very critical work, or even our personal time, right? And again, if your answers start to seem too broad, you can start to break it down into smaller problems, or you know, we go down the other path of giving it, guardrails or refinement and giving it more context to say, okay, like, well, that's not actually what I do. I do more of this in my day to day. What are some solutions for that? Right. And I guess I forgot to finish typing that again. If the answer isn't what you want, provide more guardrails, more refinement, is the path I was going on. And that's one of the things I think people jump in and they give it a very, very broad question right away, a very, very broad statement, and they get back this response that's just not that helpful. I think it's a problem of prompting and giving it the context that you need. Right. Or on the flip side, if you have a very specific activity, right? If we want to go through a workflow type of activity, you can go, pick something that you do every single day uh, in your mind or even on a piece of paper or an Excel document, talk about like what happens in each step, what parts of those steps are very time consuming, and you could deliver all that information if you write all that down to AI and say, how can you help? How can you solve these tasks? And then develop a prompt for that very repetitive or time consuming tasks. And again, once you start to add those specifics, the context, the guardrails to it, the refinement, it's going to give you better output. And if it's something you do every day, you can create a prompt with all of those things in there that you have every single day that has all of that in it, right? So you don't have to start from scratch every single day. You can give it, the big long prompt of, hey, I need you to go and summarize this data for me based on what's come in the last day, based on this things. I want to see the highlights of this. I want to see, what are the pros, the cons, you add all that into the single prompt at the beginning each day, and all of a sudden you might have something that's very useful to you day after day after day. So summarizing all that, right? LLMs power the AI tools that are available to us. They're all based on training data that's across the internet. So, right, everything that can, not, I shouldn't say everything, a lot of data that's pulled from the internet. And then hopefully we hope that a lot of them are retrained based on some better data because there's a lot of things on the internet that isn't that useful. There's a lot of practical ways that you can quickly start using these tools today. When you think about like using it as a research assistant, brainstorming for new projects, summarizing your data, drafting messages, modifying your tone, adjusting for audiences, recording data, and then being able to throw that data into another tool and then query it back in a natural language. And then at the end, remembering that we have tools that are trained based on data that's out there. And it isn't exactly like this human level or general intelligence that the companies are aspiring to or are trying to hit with their milestones. So always remember that there's some amount of bias in them, and there's maybe not always going to be the exact answer that you want. As you're working with them, always remember to refine your approaches, add the guardrails to kind of dial it in and get the best responses possible. So, with that, I will open it up to for questions and any discussion um, as we go. I'm jumping back to the chats now.
I don't think we had any questions that popped up in the chat, but folks are sure welcome to add them in or even raise your hand. And I think everything in the chat is the links.
Yep, that's what I see as well.
Sadie, do you have any questions that came to mind?
I'm always going to come up with questions. One I have is about, I really loved your starting point prompt. So if you're just getting started, really doing ChatGPT, hey, this is my business, these are my duties. What can you help with workflow? I even just tried that when you were talking about it. What would be maybe a way I think about is email. Could you maybe give some examples of how we can utilize more AI technology with email? whether that's capacity or answering emails, something like that.
So a couple of slides apply to that really well, right? If someone sends you a really long email, obviously you can drop it into one of the tools and summarize it if there's no sensitive information in it. You get the summary. You can ask, ChatGPT like what's your responsibilities or what's your takeaway from it. Um, Obviously, you can ask it to draft a response. It's one of those places where, I wouldn't copy paste that exactly out into your email and click send. But, you might ask for some things that, hey, what do I need to respond with? What are some bullets of what that looks like? Making sure that the tone is what you expect it to be. And again, you could tell it to change the tone, right? If you need it to be if you need to adjust for a specific audience, right? If you need to simplify some language down for, it's something for me, giving presentations to a variety of people often need to, try to dial it down on the technical jargon. That's something that can be helpful in that to help you to respond maybe a little bit more quicker, maybe more efficiently. Sometimes it just catches things that you don't think about, right? It's when we get going down our thought process, sometimes it's like the thing where you write something and you reread it 5 times, and there's very clearly there's something missing, but you don't notice it, but someone else coming into with a set of fresh eyes would notice it. Um, that's something that these types of chat tools can help with too, is kind of pick up on some of that. So lots of different ways that you could help it with answering email on a day-to-day basis, depending on what types of email and what you're dealing with.
Awesome. Thank you. And looks like there's a question in the chat from Veronica. Is there any cybersecurity risk when downloading any of these apps when connected to your network that is tied to your company or customer POS system?
So generally speaking, a lot of these things I would just use in a browser. Right? So we talk about ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot. I don't know that on any of my actual devices, maybe on my phone, I'd maybe downloaded the ChatGPT app just to see what it looked like. But generally speaking, I just leave them in the browser, and basically trust the browser's sandboxing security to keep that away from. Like you can't reach out and grab all the other things from your machine. It can't jump into other systems. There's if we look at Chrome, Firefox, Edge, whatever mainline browser you have is going to kind of sandbox that tool and not allow it to reach out, to basically limit it. If we were worried about security risks. Generally, if downloading something from one of the very large providers, I wouldn't be worried about it. So, OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, Copilot, those I wouldn't really worry about. I'd probably download those pretty freely, and some of them are just being integrated without us asking, right? It goes back to if you use Excel, Excel, Outlook, Word, the Office suite, your Copilot's already integrated. It's not always turned on depending on what you have, but those ones I wouldn't really worry about.
Great question. Any others? Feel free to put it in the chat or come off mute and you can ask it. Uh, Tyler, once again, fantastic content. And I think this is something we'll have to keep diving into, which is using AI in small business. And I tell you what, even last night I was in a small commercial club group around the Sioux Falls area, and I was talking about this webinar and to attend if somebody had questions and wanted to learn more about using AI. And I did have somebody raise their hand and say, what is AI? What do you mean by that? And I go, you'll have to tune in to join. So I hope that person joined, but it's even people are still learning how to use it for sure.
Yeah, it's still realistically it's new. Obviously, it's a very very fast moving target right now. It's the big thing. Um, and it's going to continue changing it because it's already changed so much compared to what it was a year ago or 2 years ago, and what's available to us as the user, right? AI itself and machine learning have actually been around for decades, right? This is not even in the last 10 years or 20 years. It's been around. I think some of the original papers on it are from the 70s or the 80s. Um, but the commercialization and the accessibility and the power of what we have is new in the last couple of years. And obviously, the models then have improved so much, and then people have started building tools around the models to right. Notebook LM as the example is like that's just a tool built around a model to help us kind of do different things. This is a really good example.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, if there are no other questions, we will wrap up a few minutes early. And I did see Elizabeth, she once again put the reminder to please fill out the topic survey for our upcoming cybersecurity webinars that we'll have with Dr. Tyler. But thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that you mark your calendar for April 2nd when we will be having our next cybersecurity webinar. And from this one today, you will receive an email with a follow-up survey and a link to rewatch this video. And it'll be on our on-demand library in the next week or so. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us with SDCEO Women's Business Center Network, as well as Grow South Dakota or Dr. Tyler with DSU. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.